I'm Jessica Martinez, 26 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the invisible daughter in my own family. While my younger sister Amanda glided through life collecting praise like trophies, I was the one scrambling behind the scenes, trying desperately to earn even a fraction of the recognition she received effortlessly. Amanda, the golden child, could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. She was the successful real estate agent with the perfect smile, the one who brought home commission checks that made Dad beam with pride and Mom post bragging photos on social media. Me? I was just Jessica, the graphic designer who worked too hard for too little acknowledgement, always one step behind in the race for my parents' approval. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Every family dinner felt like a performance where I played the supporting role while Amanda took center stage. She'd casually mention closing another house sale, and suddenly the entire table would light up with congratulations and questions about her success. When I tried to share news about landing a new design client or completing a challenging project, the conversation would somehow circle back to Amanda within minutes. It was as if my achievements existed in a parallel universe that my family couldn't quite see or didn't care to acknowledge. The dynamics in our household had been carved in stone since childhood. Amanda was the star student, the popular girl, the one who dated the right boys and made the right choices. I was the responsible one, the helper, the daughter who could be counted on to fix problems without expecting credit. When Amanda needed help with school projects, I'd stay up late designing her presentations. When she wanted to impress a new boyfriend, I'd help her plan elaborate dates. And when she failed her driving test twice, guess who spent weekends teaching her to parallel park until she finally passed? None of these contributions ever seemed to register as significant to my parents. Growing up in Riverside, California, I learned early that love in the Martinez household was conditional and competitive. My parents, Patricia and Robert Martinez, weren't cruel people, but they had a clear favorite, and it wasn't subtle. Amanda's bedroom walls were covered with certificates and ribbons from various activities and achievements, while mine remained mostly bare, except for a few art pieces I'd created myself. During family gatherings, relatives would gush over Amanda's latest accomplishments, while I helped serve dinner and cleaned up afterward, practically invisible to everyone, except when they needed something. The pattern repeated itself throughout high school and college. Amanda struggled academically, so I spent countless hours tutoring her in subjects I'd already mastered. When she applied to colleges, I helped write her essays and organize her applications, watching her get accepted to schools with my words supporting her candidacy. Meanwhile, my own college applications received minimal family attention. I was expected to figure things out on my own, because, according to my parents, I was naturally more independent and didn't need as much support as Amanda. College provided a brief respite from the family dynamics. I studied graphic design at UC San Diego, finally surrounded by people who appreciated creativity and original thinking. My professors recognized my talent, and I built a portfolio that landed me internships and freelance work. For 4 years I existed in a bubble where my worth wasn't constantly measured against Amanda's achievements. I developed friendships with people who valued my contributions and saw me as more than just someone's sister, but graduation meant returning to Riverside and slipping back into familiar patterns. I started building my freelance graphic design business while living in a small apartment downtown, slowly establishing myself in the local market. I specialized in social media management and brand design for small businesses, work that I found fulfilling and creative. My client base grew steadily, and I began earning enough to consider expanding my services. The dream was to eventually open my own design studio, and maybe even hire other creative professionals. However, family obligations continued to interrupt my progress. When Amanda decided to get her real estate license, my parents insisted I help her study for the exam. When she needed professional headshots for her new career, they expected me to design her marketing materials for free. When she struggled to understand social media marketing for her listings, Guess who spent weekends teaching her how to create engaging content? Each time my own projects got pushed aside while I supported Amanda's latest venture, the most painful part wasn't the extra work or even the lack of recognition. It was the casual way my family assumed my time was less valuable than Amanda's. If I mentioned being busy with a client deadline, my parents would dismiss it as something I could easily reschedule, but if Amanda had a potential house showing, the entire family would rearrange their schedules to accommodate her needs. My work was treated as a hobby that could be interrupted at any time, while hers was respected as a serious career deserving of support and priority. This dynamic reached a breaking point 3 years ago, when our family's auto repair shop faced a financial crisis that threatened to close the business my father had built over 25 years. Martinez Auto Repair had been Dad's pride and joy, a neighborhood staple where he'd earned respect as an honest mechanic who treated customers fairly. But changing technology and increased competition from chain stores had steadily eroded the customer base, and Dad's old-school approach to marketing wasn't attracting younger car owners. The crisis began when their longtime business partner embezzled nearly $30,000 before disappearing, leaving the shop unable to pay suppliers or cover operating expenses. Dad was devastated, not just by the financial loss, but by the betrayal of someone he'd trusted completely. Mom spent sleepless nights worrying about losing the business that had supported our family for decades. They talked about bankruptcy, about selling the property, about Dad having to find employment after being his own boss for so long. I couldn't stand watching my parents' dreams crumble, especially knowing I had skills that could help save the business. At the time, I'd just been offered a substantial contract with a growing tech startup in Los Angeles. They wanted me to design their complete brand identity and manage their social media launch, a project worth $35,000 that would have established my reputation with larger clients and opened doors to similar opportunities. It was exactly the kind of breakthrough I'd been working toward, the project that could have transformed my freelance work into a legitimate design firm. But my family needed me more than I needed career advancement, or at least that's what I told myself. I called the startup's marketing director and explained that I couldn't take the contract due to family obligations. The disappointment in her voice was evident as she wished me luck and mentioned they'd probably have to hire a larger agency instead. I watched my biggest opportunity slip away as I committed to saving Martinez Auto Repair instead. The next 6 months consumed my life completely. I created a comprehensive digital marketing strategy for the shop, starting with a professional website that showcased their services and highlighted Dad's expertise and reliability. I designed new logos and branding materials that gave the business a modern look while maintaining its neighborhood charm. The social media campaigns I developed featured customer testimonials, before and after photos of repair work, and educational content about car maintenance that positioned Dad as a trusted expert. I negotiated with local parts suppliers to establish better payment terms and convinced several to extend credit based on the shop's improved marketing presence. I organized community outreach events, partnered with local businesses for cross-promotion, and even convinced a few automotive bloggers to feature the shop in their content. The work was exhausting and all-consuming, requiring me to put my other clients on hold and work 16-hour days to manage both the marketing campaign and the operational improvements needed to support increased business.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The transformation was remarkable and swift. Within 3 months, the shop's customer base had doubled as younger car owners discovered their services through social media and online reviews. The website generated steady appointment bookings, and the improved reputation attracted customers who'd previously gone to chain stores. Revenue increased dramatically, and Dad was able to hire an additional mechanic to handle the increased workload. By the end of 6 months, Martinez Auto Repair was not only financially stable, but actually thriving in ways it never had before. I expected my parents to acknowledge my role in saving their livelihood, to recognize that my marketing expertise and countless hours of work had rescued them from bankruptcy. I imagined Dad finally seeing my career as valuable and important, maybe even asking for my continued involvement in growing the business. I pictured Mom telling her friends about how her daughter's talents had saved the family shop, giving me the same proud recognition she constantly showered on Amanda. Instead, they announced at a family dinner that they were making Amanda a partner in the business. According to my parents, her real estate experience gave her valuable insight into property management and business operations. They praised her natural leadership abilities and expressed confidence that she would help take the shop to the next level. Amanda accepted graciously, talking about her vision for expanding into multiple locations and diversifying their services. I sat at that dinner table, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Amanda hadn't contributed a single hour to saving the business. She'd been busy building her real estate career while I sacrificed my own opportunities to rescue our family shop. Yet here she was being rewarded with ownership while my contributions were completely ignored. When I tried to remind them of the work I'd done, Dad patted my shoulder and said I'd been helpful, but that Amanda's business background made her the logical choice for long-term leadership. The partnership meant Amanda would receive a percentage of the shop's profits in addition to having input on major business decisions. The financial benefits alone represented thousands of dollars annually, money that reflected the success I'd created through my marketing efforts. But more painful than the financial oversight was the clear message that my parents trusted Amanda's judgment over mine, even in areas where I'd proven my expertise and she had no relevant experience. Mike Chen, my best friend since college, witnessed my devastation during one of our regular meetups at Corner Cafe. We'd maintained our friendship despite living in different cities, and he always visited when business brought him to Riverside. Mike understood the family dynamics because he'd watched them play out during college visits and holiday gatherings. He'd seen how my achievements were minimized while Amanda's were celebrated, and he'd always encouraged me to prioritize my own goals over family expectations. That evening at the cafe, I broke down and told him everything about the sacrificed contract, the months of work saving the shop, and Amanda's sudden partnership. Mike listened quietly, his expression growing more frustrated as the story unfolded. When I finished, he leaned forward and spoke with unusual intensity about how my family was exploiting my loyalty and generosity. He pointed out that I'd given up a career-defining opportunity to save their business, only to watch them hand the benefits to someone who'd contributed nothing. His words stung because they articulated what I'd been afraid to admit to myself. I was so desperate for my parents' approval that I'd become willing to sacrifice my own success for the chance to earn their recognition, but no amount of sacrifice seemed sufficient to change their perception of me as the helper rather than the achiever. Mike urged me to stop expecting them to change and start protecting my own interests, but I wasn't ready to hear that message yet. Instead, I doubled down on trying to prove my worth. I continued providing marketing support for the auto shop without compensation, updating their social media and managing their online presence. I helped Amanda understand the digital marketing systems I'd implemented, essentially training her to manage the very campaigns that had saved the business. I told myself that eventually they'd see how valuable my contributions were, and would finally give me the recognition I deserved. The pattern continued for 2 more years. Amanda's real estate career flourished, aided by the networking opportunities and business credibility that came with being a partner in a successful auto repair shop. She used the shop's reputation and customer base to generate referrals for her property sales, while I continued working behind the scenes to maintain the marketing presence that kept customers coming through the door. My own design business remained small and local, limited by the time and energy I continued investing in family obligations. Then Amanda announced her engagement to Tyler Williams, a fellow real estate agent she'd met through a professional conference. Tyler was everything my parents wanted in a son-in-law: successful, ambitious, and capable of providing the lifestyle they envisioned for their favorite daughter. The engagement was celebrated with a lavish party at Riverside Country Club, where Amanda's ring was admired, and wedding plans were discussed with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for major holidays. As the wedding planning began, I saw an opportunity to finally earn the recognition that had eluded me for so long. Weddings were intensely personal events, where creativity and attention to detail mattered enormously. If I could design and coordinate the perfect wedding for Amanda, surely my parents would have to acknowledge my talents and contributions. The wedding would be a showcase of everything I could accomplish when given the chance to demonstrate my full range of skills. I volunteered to handle the wedding planning, offering to manage everything from vendor coordination to design elements. My parents accepted my offer with the casual assumption that I'd naturally take on this responsibility, just as I'd handled countless other family projects over the years. But this time felt different because the stakes were higher, and the opportunity for recognition was greater. A beautiful, flawlessly executed wedding would be impossible to ignore or minimize. I threw myself into the planning with the same intensity I'd brought to saving the auto shop. I researched venues, interviewed caterers, and created detailed timelines for every aspect of the celebration. I designed custom invitations, coordinated color schemes, and managed vendor communications. The project consumed my evenings and weekends, but I was energized by the vision of creating something spectacular that would finally prove my worth to my family. However, as the planning progressed, familiar patterns began to emerge that would ultimately lead to the most painful confrontation of my life. Parts 2. Myths, the Foundation and Sacrifice. The Martinez family dynamics had been solidified long before Amanda's engagement announcement. Our house in Riverside operated under an unspoken hierarchy that placed Amanda's needs, desires, and achievements above everyone else's considerations. This wasn't malicious favoritism, but rather a gradual evolution that had occurred so naturally that questioning it felt almost rebellious. Amanda possessed an effortless charm that drew people toward her, combined with a confidence that made her opinions seem more valuable and her problems more urgent than anyone else's. Growing up, I learned to navigate around Amanda's moods and schedules like a satellite orbiting a planet. If she had a bad day at school, the entire household would adjust to accommodate her need for space and attention. If she wanted to watch a particular television show, my preferences were automatically dismissed. If she needed help with homework, my own assignments would be postponed until after I'd assisted her. These small accommodations seemed reasonable individually, but collectively they established a pattern where my needs consistently ranked second to hers. Mom and Dad never explicitly stated their preference for Amanda, but their actions revealed the truth in countless ways. They attended every single one of Amanda's school events, from minor presentations to social gatherings, often rearranging work schedules to be present. Meanwhile, my art shows and academic achievements were celebrated with distracted congratulations and promises to attend the next one. When Amanda expressed interest in joining expensive extracurricular activities, money was found immediately. When I asked to attend a summer art camp, the cost was deemed too high, and I was encouraged to pursue more practical interests instead. The financial disparities extended into our college years with painful clarity. Amanda's college expenses were covered completely by our parents, including her meal plans, dormitory costs, and even a generous monthly allowance for social activities. She drove a reliable car that Dad maintained regularly, and her college wardrobe was updated each semester with shopping trips that Mom treated like special bonding experiences. My college funding came primarily through academic scholarships, student loans, and part-time work that limited my social involvement and required careful budgeting for basic necessities. During holiday breaks, the contrast became even more pronounced. Amanda would return home to a hero's welcome, with Mom preparing elaborate meals and Dad clearing his schedule to hear about her college experiences. Her stories about parties, friendships, and romantic relationships were received with engaged interest and supportive advice. My academic achievements and creative projects were acknowledged politely before conversations shifted to more interesting topics, usually involving Amanda's latest adventures or future plans. The pattern followed us into our professional lives, with devastating consistency. When Amanda struggled with her real estate licensing exam, our parents hired an expensive tutor and created a quiet study environment that accommodated her learning style. They celebrated her passing the exam as if she'd achieved something extraordinary, throwing a family dinner and inviting relatives to acknowledge her accomplishment. When I completed my graphic design degree and landed my first significant freelance contracts, the achievement was treated as expected rather than celebrated, just another step in a path that didn't particularly interest or impress them. Amanda's real estate career received constant family support and promotion. Dad would mention her services to customers at the auto shop, generating referrals that helped establish her client base. Mom shared Amanda's listings on social media and encouraged friends to consider her for their property needs. Family gatherings became informal networking opportunities where relatives were updated on Amanda's success and encouraged to spread word about her professional services. The family business became intertwined with Amanda's career advancement in ways that benefited her substantially while requiring minimal effort on her part. My design work, by contrast, remained largely separate from family support systems. When I mentioned potential clients or challenging projects, the conversations were brief and polite, without genuine engagement or offers of assistance. My parents seemed to view graphic design as a hobby that generated some income rather than a legitimate career deserving of respect and support. They rarely recommended my services to their acquaintances, and my professional achievements were treated as personal interests rather than family accomplishments worth celebrating or promoting. The emotional toll of this consistent pattern created a deep hunger for validation that influenced every major decision I made. I found myself constantly seeking opportunities to prove my worth and demonstrate my value to the family. Each project became a chance to finally earn the recognition that seemed to flow so naturally toward Amanda. I worked harder, sacrificed more, and gave freely of my time and expertise, always believing that the next gesture would be significant enough to shift their perception of me. This desperate need for approval made me vulnerable to exploitation, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I interpreted my family's casual assumption that I would handle their problems as trust in my abilities rather than taking advantage of my willingness to serve. When they needed help, they turned to me because I was reliable and competent, but they credited Amanda when successes resulted from my efforts. The dynamic was comfortable for everyone except me, and challenging it felt like disrupting a system that worked well for the people I loved most. The auto shop crisis, 3 years earlier, had represented the ultimate opportunity to prove my worth to the family. Martina's Auto Repair wasn't just Dad's business, it was the foundation of our family's identity and financial security. Dad had built the shop from nothing, starting as a mechanic working for others, before saving enough to open his own location. The early years were difficult, with Dad working long hours and Mom handling the bookkeeping while raising 2 young children. The shop's success represented their American dream, realized through hard work and dedication. When their business partner's embezzlement threatened to destroy everything they'd built, the crisis felt personal to me in ways that extended beyond family loyalty. I had memories of playing in the shop's office while Dad worked on cars, of helping Mom organize receipts and customer files during school breaks. The shop represented stability and achievement in our family's story, and losing it would have devastated my parents in ways that went far beyond financial loss. The embezzlement itself was particularly painful because it involved someone Dad had trusted completely. Frank Morrison had been Dad's business partner for over 8 years, handling the financial side of operations, while Dad focused on the mechanical work. Frank seemed honest and reliable, always arriving early and staying late, treating customer payments and vendor relationships with apparent care and professionalism. He attended family barbecues and holiday gatherings, and his betrayal felt like a violation of our family's trust and generosity. The discovery of the missing money came during a routine audit required for a loan application Dad needed to upgrade some equipment. The accountant found discrepancies in the books that initially appeared to be simple errors, but revealed a sophisticated pattern of theft that had been occurring for over 2 years. Frank had been skimming cash payments, manipulating vendor invoices, and even stealing parts that he resold to other shops. The total loss approached $30,000, money that the shop needed for operating expenses and improvements. Frank disappeared the day before Dad planned to confront him about the discrepancies, leaving behind empty bank accounts and a resignation letter that offered no explanation or apology. The betrayal was devastating for Dad, who had always prided himself on being a good judge of character and treating employees like family. The financial loss was severe, but the emotional impact was even worse. Dad blamed himself for trusting Frank and questioned his ability to run the business effectively. The timing of the crisis couldn't have been worse. The automotive industry was changing rapidly, with newer cars requiring specialized diagnostic equipment that the shop couldn't afford. Chain stores and quick lube locations were capturing customers who wanted fast, convenient service rather than the personalized attention that Dad provided. The shop's customer base was aging along with Dad, and younger car owners were choosing newer businesses with modern facilities and updated technology. Mom tried to stay optimistic, but I could see the stress wearing on both of my parents. They talked quietly about their options, discussions that always ended with worried silence and uncertain futures. Dad mentioned finding a job with another mechanic, starting over as an employee, after decades of being his own boss. Mom worried about their retirement savings and whether they could afford to keep their house if the shop failed. The weight of their concerns was visible in their faces and audible in their conversations. I couldn't stand watching their dreams collapse, especially when I knew I possessed skills that could help save the business they'd spent their lives building. My graphic design and digital marketing expertise were exactly what the shop needed to attract younger customers and compete with modern service providers. I understood social media marketing, website development, and brand positioning in ways that could transform their struggling business into a thriving operation. The decision to sacrifice the tech startup contract wasn't made lightly. The Los Angeles opportunity represented everything I'd been working toward as a freelance designer. The company was developing innovative software for small businesses, and they needed comprehensive brand identity work that would showcase my abilities to a broader market. The $35,000 contract would have provided financial stability while establishing my reputation with the kind of progressive clients who could generate ongoing high-value projects. The startup's marketing director had been impressed with my portfolio and creative approach during our initial meetings. She described their vision for a brand that would appeal to young entrepreneurs while maintaining professional credibility. The project included logo design, website development, social media strategy, and marketing materials that would launch their product to potential investors and early customers. Successfully completing this contract would have opened doors to similar opportunities and potentially attracted the attention of larger agencies interested in partnering with talented freelancers. Walking away from that opportunity felt like closing a door on the future I'd been working to create. The marketing director was understanding but disappointed, mentioning that they would probably need to hire a larger agency with more resources and availability. I knew I was giving up more than just money. I was sacrificing credibility and momentum that might never return. Freelance designers depend on building relationships and reputation, and turning down significant projects can damage both in ways that are difficult to repair. But family loyalty felt more important than personal advancement, especially when my parents were facing the potential loss of everything they'd worked to achieve. I convinced myself that other opportunities would come along, that helping save the family business was the right choice regardless of personal cost. I told myself that my parents would finally see my value and appreciate my sacrifice when they understood how much I'd given up to help them. The work of saving Martinez Auto Repair consumed the next 6 months of my life in ways that were both exhausting and exhilarating. I threw myself into the project with the intensity of someone proving their worth and competence to people whose opinions mattered more than anyone else's. Every aspect of the shop's operations needed improvement, from basic customer communication to complex digital marketing strategies that would position them competitively in a changing market. I started by conducting extensive research on the local automotive service industry, identifying competitors,
analyzing their marketing approaches, and discovering gaps in the market that Martinez Auto Repair could fill. The chain stores focused on speed and convenience but offered impersonal service and limited expertise. Independent shops like Dad's provided better customer relationships and mechanical knowledge, but often lacked modern amenities and marketing presence. The opportunity existed to combine Dad's expertise and personal attention with contemporary business practices and marketing techniques. The website development alone required weeks of intensive work. I interviewed Dad extensively about his experience, expertise, and approach to customer service, using his insights to create content that showcased the shop's unique value proposition. I photographed the facility, highlighting both the modern equipment and the experienced craftsmanship that set them apart from competitors. Customer testimonials were gathered and featured prominently, emphasizing the trust and reliability that existing clients experienced working with Dad. The visual branding needed to reflect both tradition and innovation, honoring the shop's history while appealing to younger customers who might initially judge the business based on its online presence. I designed logos and marketing materials that suggested competence and reliability while maintaining approachability and neighborhood charm. The color schemes and typography choices were carefully selected to appeal to both longtime customers and potential new clients who might discover the shop through digital marketing. Social media strategy required understanding platforms and audiences that Dad found completely foreign but which were essential for reaching younger car owners. I created content calendars featuring educational posts about car maintenance, behind-the-scenes glimpses of repair work, and customer success stories that demonstrated the shop's expertise and reliability. The posts needed to be informative and engaging while maintaining professional credibility and encouraging customer interaction. The most challenging aspect was managing the shop's operations while implementing marketing improvements. I spent countless hours at the facility, observing customer interactions, identifying inefficiencies, and suggesting improvements that would enhance both service quality and customer satisfaction. I redesigned the waiting area, improved appointment scheduling systems, and streamlined communication between customers and mechanics to reduce misunderstandings and delays. Working with vendors required delicate negotiations to establish better payment terms while maintaining quality and reliability. Many suppliers had been burned by businesses that failed to pay their bills, making them skeptical about extending credit or offering favorable terms. I had to demonstrate the shop's improved financial prospects and marketing strategies to convince vendors that Martinez Auto Repair was a good investment worth supporting with flexible payment arrangements. The community outreach events I organized were designed to rebuild the shop's reputation and visibility in Riverside. I coordinated car care clinics where Dad taught basic maintenance skills to local residents, positioning him as an expert and building relationships with potential customers. Partnership arrangements with other local businesses created cross-promotional opportunities that benefited everyone involved while establishing the shop as an active and engaged community member. The transformation was remarkable and swift, exceeding even my optimistic projections. Within 3 months, the shop's customer base had doubled as younger car owners discovered their services through social media and online searches. The website generated steady appointment bookings from people who had researched local options and chosen Martinez Auto Repair based on their professional online presence and positive customer reviews. Revenue increased dramatically, allowing Dad to hire an additional mechanic and invest in updated diagnostic equipment. More importantly, the shop's reputation was restored and enhanced beyond its previous levels. Customers frequently mentioned finding them through online searches and being impressed with the professional communication and quality service they received. The educational content I'd created established Dad as a trusted expert whose advice was valued and shared within the community. The shop became busier and more profitable than it had ever been, with a diverse customer base that ensured long-term sustainability. I expected this dramatic success to finally earn me the recognition and appreciation I'd been seeking throughout my life. I had literally saved my family's business and financial security through months of intensive work and creative expertise. The results were undeniable and the impact was transformational, not just for the shop, but for my parents' entire future. I imagine Dad finally acknowledging my professional abilities and Mom proudly telling friends about her daughter's remarkable achievements. Instead, at a family dinner that should have been a celebration of our collective success, my parents announced that Amanda would be joining the business as a partner. They praised her real estate experience and business acumen, expressing confidence that her involvement would help take the shop to even greater heights. Amanda graciously accepted the partnership, talking about her vision for expansion and her plans to bring additional professional expertise to the operation. I sat at that table feeling invisible and betrayed, watching my parents credit Amanda with business knowledge that I had just spent 6 months demonstrating through actual results. Everything I had accomplished was being overlooked in favor of Amanda's theoretical potential and assumed capabilities. The partnership meant she would receive ongoing financial benefits from the success I had created, while my contributions were treated as helpful assistance rather than the fundamental transformation they actually represented. When I tried to remind them of the work I'd done to save the business, Dad patted my shoulder condescendingly and acknowledged that I'd been helpful during the transition. Mom nodded approvingly and mentioned that it was nice that I'd been able to contribute my skills to the family effort. Their response made it clear that they viewed my months of intensive work as a temporary favor rather than a professional achievement deserving of recognition or ongoing involvement. The financial implications alone were staggering. Amanda's partnership would entitle her to a percentage of profits that I had generated through my marketing strategies and operational improvements. The thousands of dollars in annual income she would receive represented a direct benefit from work she hadn't contributed to in any meaningful way. But beyond the money was the message that my parents trusted Amanda's judgment and capabilities more than mine, even in areas where I had proven expertise and she had no relevant experience. Mike Chen witnessed my devastation during one of his visits to Riverside when I broke down and told him the entire story over coffee at Corner Cafe. He had watched our family dynamics during college and understood the patterns of favoritism that had shaped my life, but even he was shocked by the brazenness of my parents' decision to reward Amanda for achievements she hadn't earned. His anger on my behalf was both validating and painful, confirming that my treatment was as unfair as it felt. Mike's perspective was invaluable because he understood my capabilities and achievements in ways that my family seemed unable to recognize. He had watched me build my design business, had seen my creative work and professional accomplishments, and knew the sacrifices I'd made to help my family over the years. His frustration with their treatment of me was genuine and fierce, but it also highlighted how isolated I'd become in accepting behavior that others found obviously wrong. That conversation with Mike planted seeds of doubt about my relationship with my family that would continue growing over the following months. For the first time, I began questioning whether my loyalty and generosity were being reciprocated or simply exploited. I started noticing how quickly they turned to me when problems needed solving, but how rarely they considered my needs or acknowledged my contributions. The pattern was so established that challenging it felt like questioning the fundamental nature of our relationships. However, I wasn't ready to accept Mike's assessment that my family was taking advantage of me. I still believed that eventually they would recognize my worth and value my contributions appropriately. I convinced myself that the partnership with Amanda was a temporary arrangement that would evolve as they saw how much they needed my ongoing involvement. I continued providing marketing support for the auto shop without compensation, maintaining the systems and strategies that kept customers coming through their doors. The next 2 years followed familiar patterns, with me continuing to sacrifice my own opportunities to support family needs while receiving minimal recognition for my efforts. Amanda's real estate career flourished, aided by her partnership in a successful local business that provided credibility and networking opportunities.
She used the shop's reputation and customer base to generate referrals for property sales, benefiting financially from marketing strategies I continued to maintain and update. My own design business remained smaller than it could have been, limited by the time and energy I invested in family obligations that were expected rather than appreciated. I told myself that family came first and that professional success was less important than maintaining relationships with people I loved. But privately, I was growing exhausted by the one-sided nature of our exchanges and the constant feeling that my contributions were invisible or unimportant. When Amanda announced her engagement to Tyler Williams, I saw another opportunity to prove my worth through exceptional service and creative achievement. Wedding planning would allow me to showcase the full range of my skills in ways that would be impossible to ignore or minimize. A beautiful, flawlessly executed wedding would demonstrate my capabilities while creating lasting memories that the family would associate with my talents and dedication. I volunteered enthusiastically to handle all aspects of the wedding planning, from vendor coordination to design elements. My parents accepted my offer with their usual assumption that I would naturally take responsibility for complex family projects, but I was energized by the possibility of finally creating something spectacular enough to earn their genuine appreciation and recognition. The wedding planning consumed my life with the same intensity I'd brought to saving the auto shop, but this time I was motivated by hope rather than desperation. I researched venues throughout Riverside and the surrounding areas, looking for locations that would provide the perfect backdrop for Amanda's special day. I interviewed caterers, florists, photographers, and musicians, building relationships with vendors who could deliver exceptional service within our budget constraints. I created detailed timelines and coordination schedules that would ensure every aspect of the celebration unfolded smoothly. I designed custom invitations that reflected Amanda's personality and the couple's relationship story. I managed vendor communications, coordinated delivery schedules, and created contingency plans for potential problems that might arise. The project was complex and demanding, but I was energized by the vision of creating something beautiful that would finally prove my value to my family. However, as the wedding planning progressed, I began encountering the same patterns of dismissal and lack of appreciation that had characterized my previous efforts to earn family recognition. Amanda's demands became increasingly elaborate and expensive, stretching both my budget and my patience in ways that felt familiar and discouraging. The wedding was becoming less about creating something beautiful and more about proving once again that nothing I did would ever be enough to satisfy my family's expectations or earn their genuine respect. Amanda's wedding planning had consumed months of my life, with me pouring $12,000 of my savings into creating her perfect day. I had coordinated every detail from venue selection to vendor management, designing custom invitations, and creating detailed timelines that would ensure flawless execution. Initially, Amanda seemed grateful for my efforts, but as the wedding date approached, her expectations began expanding beyond reasonable boundaries. The first major escalation came when Amanda demanded upgrading from our planned buffet to a formal plated dinner service, adding nearly $2,000 to our catering costs. When I explained the budget constraints, she dismissed my concerns and suggested I was being unnecessarily cheap for her once-in-a-lifetime celebration. Similar demands followed for elaborate floral arrangements featuring imported orchids, professional lighting systems, and entertainment upgrades that would transform the reception into an extravagant production. Each request individually seemed reasonable, but collectively they represented thousands of additional dollars I simply didn't have. I had already stretched my finances beyond comfortable limits, and these constant upgrades were pushing toward financial ruin. More frustrating was Amanda's attitude shift from appreciation to entitlement, as if my extraordinary efforts were simply the minimum she deserved rather than generous sacrifices requiring recognition. My parents' involvement made everything worse. Instead of acknowledging my financial contributions or supporting reasonable boundaries, they consistently sided with Amanda's escalating demands. Mom would mention how important it was for Amanda to have her dream wedding, implying that my budget concerns were selfish. Dad would nod approvingly at Amanda's elaborate visions, expressing confidence that I would somehow make everything work regardless of cost or complexity. Tyler, Amanda's fiancé, remained frustratingly passive throughout these discussions. He would enthusiastically support Amanda's expensive ideas without offering to contribute additional resources or acknowledging the financial strain his silence was placing on me. His detached approach meant Amanda looked to me as solely responsible for translating her dreams into reality, regardless of impossible constraints. The final breaking point came during a family dinner 2 weeks before the wedding. Amanda arrived with yet another list of last-minute upgrades, including luxury transportation, champagne toasts for all guests, and professional videography services. These additions would cost another $4,000 while creating logistics nightmares during the final preparation period. When I explained these changes were impossible, Amanda's reaction was explosive. She accused me of sabotaging her wedding day out of jealousy and spite. Her words were designed to wound, suggesting I was bitter about her success and using budget excuses to deliberately limit her happiness. She claimed any competent planner would find ways to accommodate her reasonable requests, implying my limitations represented personal failures rather than realistic constraints. Tyler finally spoke, but only to support Amanda's perspective and dismiss my concerns as minor budget issues. He mentioned that weddings justified extraordinary financial sacrifices for lifetime memories, revealing complete ignorance of both the amounts I'd already spent and the complexity of coordination challenges involved in last-minute changes. My parents' response delivered the crushing blow. Instead of acknowledging months of intensive work or defending my position against unreasonable demands, they sided completely with Amanda. Mom expressed disappointment that I was creating stress during what should be joyful preparations, suggesting I was being difficult when Amanda needed family support most. Dad was even more hurtful, mentioning that Amanda deserved the best possible celebration and that I should feel honored to contribute to her perfect day. He suggested my resistance reflected selfishness and lack of family commitment, treating my legitimate budget concerns as excuses rather than financial realities. Their unified dismissal of my sacrifices while supporting Amanda's impossible demands felt like ultimate betrayal. I had spent months and thousands of dollars creating an extraordinary celebration, only to be criticized for failing to provide even more. The family dynamics that had shaped my entire life were playing out in their most extreme and painful form. Then came the words that changed everything. Amanda, looking directly at me with obvious frustration, declared that maybe it would be better if I didn't attend the wedding at all. She suggested my negative attitude and constant money complaints were ruining what should be the happiest time of her life. Mom immediately agreed, adding that my presence might indeed be problematic if I couldn't be more supportive and enthusiastic. The devastating words followed, "On your sister's wedding day, it's better if you're not there." Dad nodded his agreement, suggesting family events should be positive occasions where everyone contributed joy rather than problems. The room fell silent as their words sank in. They were officially uninviting me from Amanda's wedding, the celebration I had planned and funded. The event I had hoped would finally demonstrate my worth had become the occasion for my rejection and exile from their most important gathering. I sat stunned, feeling the foundation of my family relationships crumbling. Everything I had believed about loyalty, sacrifice, and eventual recognition was revealed as naive fantasy. They had accepted my money, time, expertise, and dedication, then discarded me when I couldn't provide unlimited resources beyond my capabilities. The finality of their rejection was both devastating and clarifying. I could continue begging for acceptance, sacrificing more financial stability and self-respect for people who would never adequately value my contributions. Alternatively, I could accept that their treatment was unlikely to change and make decisions prioritizing my own well-being and future. Standing from that dinner table felt like crossing a threshold into a different life. I looked at each family member, seeing them clearly as people who had consistently prioritized their own comfort over my needs and sacrifices. The love remained, but it was no longer sufficient to justify accepting treatment that diminished my worth and potential. Walking out of that house, I felt strange relief that the pretense was finally over. They had shown exactly how much they valued my contributions and presence. Now I could make decisions based on reality rather than continuing to hope for changes that would never come. The wedding they had planned so carefully would proceed without me, but it would also proceed without my continued support or coordination. They wanted me gone, and I was ready to grant their request in ways they hadn't expected or considered. The celebration they demanded would become a lesson in consequences of taking loyalty and generosity for granted. The 48 hours following that devastating dinner were filled with a clarity I had never experienced before. Every phone call I made, every decision I implemented, felt like reclaiming pieces of myself that had been scattered across years of unappreciated sacrifice. The wedding vendors, who had grown accustomed to working with me over the past months, were surprised by my sudden change in approach, but they were professional enough to accommodate my requests without asking uncomfortable questions. I started with the caterer, explaining that due to unforeseen family circumstances, we needed to cancel the elaborate dinner service that Amanda had demanded. The catering company was understanding, especially since I had built a good relationship with them during months of planning. They agreed to refund the majority of my deposit, keeping only a small percentage to cover administrative costs and ingredients already ordered. The relief of seeing that money returned to my account was immediate and tangible. The florist was equally accommodating when I explained that we were scaling back the floral arrangements significantly. The expensive imported orchids and elaborate centerpieces that Amanda had insisted upon were canceled, replaced with a much simpler package that would provide basic ceremony decorations without the extravagant reception displays. The florist mentioned that they could use the exotic flowers for another event, making the cancellation easier for everyone involved. The most satisfying call was to the entertainment coordinator, who had been working with me to arrange the elaborate lighting systems and upgraded sound equipment that Amanda demanded. When I explained that we were returning to our original simpler plan, he seemed relieved. The complex setup had been causing him logistical headaches, and the simpler arrangement would be much easier to execute successfully. Another substantial refund was processed, returning money I desperately needed for my own financial stability. Each vendor conversation followed a similar pattern. The professionals I had been working with were understanding and accommodating, recognizing that family dynamics could complicate wedding planning in unexpected ways. Many of them had dealt with similar situations before and knew how to handle cancellations and modifications diplomatically. Their professionalism made the process smoother than I had anticipated, and most were willing to provide partial or complete refunds rather than lose future business relationships. The photography situation required more delicate handling. The photographer I had hired was talented and expensive, someone whose work would have created beautiful memories of Amanda's celebration. However, his services were no longer necessary in their full scope. I explained that family circumstances had changed, and that we needed to scale back to a much simpler package, covering only basic ceremony photography. He was disappointed, but agreed to modify our contract accordingly. The venue coordinator at Riverside Country Club was perhaps the most challenging conversation. They had been expecting an elaborate celebration with specific setup requirements and timeline coordination. When I explained that the event was being significantly simplified, she expressed concern about last-minute changes affecting other bookings and staff scheduling. However, after discussing the modifications in detail, we reached an agreement that worked for everyone involved while reducing overall costs substantially. By the end of those 2 days, I had successfully canceled or modified every aspect of Amanda's wedding that exceeded our original reasonable budget. The celebration would still happen, but it would be exactly what we had initially planned before Amanda's demands spiraled out of control. The difference was that now she would experience the wedding she had originally agreed to, rather than the extravagant production she had demanded at my expense. The financial impact was substantial and immediate. Between refunds from canceled upgrades and money saved by returning to simpler arrangements, I recovered nearly $8,000 of the $12,000 I had invested. The remaining $4,000 covered the basic wedding services that any reasonable celebration would require, meaning I had essentially provided Amanda with a beautiful wedding at a fraction of the cost she had demanded. More importantly, I had protected my financial future from the reckless spending that my family had expected me to absorb without consideration for my own needs or limitations. The money I recovered could be reinvested in my design business or saved for my own future rather than disappearing into Amanda's fantasy celebration. For the first time in years, I felt like I was making financial decisions that prioritized my own well-being rather than sacrificing everything for family approval. The psychological impact was even more significant than the financial recovery. Each phone call I made represented a choice to value my own needs and boundaries rather than automatically deferring to family expectations. I was no longer the person who absorbed unreasonable demands without question or who sacrificed endlessly for people who took my generosity for granted. The process of reclaiming control over the wedding plans felt like reclaiming control over my entire life. I didn't inform my family about these changes immediately. They had made it clear that my presence wasn't wanted at the wedding, and I saw no reason to involve them in decisions that would ensure the celebration stayed within reasonable boundaries. They would discover the modifications when they arrived at the venue and realized that their demands for extravagance had been replaced with the elegant but affordable celebration we had originally planned. The anticipation of their reaction was both terrifying and exhilarating. Part of me worried about the anger and accusations that would certainly follow when they realized what had happened. But a larger part felt liberated by the knowledge that I was no longer responsible for managing their emotions or protecting them from the consequences of their unreasonable expectations. They had chosen to exclude me from the celebration, and now they would experience exactly what that exclusion meant in practical terms. Mike Chen called, during this period, checking on how I was handling the family crisis. When I explained what I had done, his reaction was immediate and supportive. He praised my decision to protect myself financially and emotionally, mentioning that it was about time I started prioritizing my own needs over their endless demands. His encouragement validated my choices and reinforced my growing confidence that I was finally making decisions that served my own interests rather than sacrificing everything for people who didn't appreciate my efforts. The evening before Amanda's wedding, I packed a small suitcase and prepared to leave Riverside for an extended period. I had decided that regardless of how the wedding went, I needed distance from my family to process everything that had happened and decide how to move forward with relationships that had become toxic and one-sided. Portland, Oregon, had always appealed to me as a creative city with opportunities for design professionals, and I had been researching the possibility of relocating there for several months. As I prepared to leave town, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief that surprised me with its intensity. The sadness came from recognizing that my relationship with my family might never recover from the damage that had been done. The relief came from finally accepting that their treatment of me had been wrong and that I deserved better than what they had been willing to provide. The wedding that was happening without me would mark the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of something entirely different. 2 days later, I began making phone calls that would ensure Amanda's wedding became memorable, though perhaps not in ways originally envisioned. The transformation that followed would teach my family that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt, and some people, once pushed too far, will not return to positions of servitude. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.